Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 116 of the Yakking Show. This is the show for awakening you to new perspectives for the changing world we find ourselves in. As always, we have interesting guests. Today is no exception. I've heard him before, and you're in for a good time with this one. But first, I'd like to request, if you like our show, please consider subscribing to the channel you're either watching or listening on. More subscribers gets more exposure for our guests, and it's all about exposure for our guests. Plus, the bonus is you won't miss the next exciting episode of our show. Enough from me. Let me introduce my co-host, Kathleen Beauvais, down in Waterloo. How are you doing today, Kathleen?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you all so very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate you, and we love reading your comments, so please keep those coming. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today, and we're so excited about this. Please welcome James Mulvany to our show. James, welcome.
Thanks very much for the warm welcome. And the first thing I wanted to say was congratulations, 114 episodes. That is impressive.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
Yes, we're having so much fun. We are.
Yeah.
We're just having so much fun. But James, today is all about you. You are the head cheerleader and founder of Matchmaker.fm. And no, it is not a dating site. And Peter and I absolutely love this website, but we're going to let James tell you all about it. So James, can you give tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to start Matchmaker.fm? What is it all about?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've been like my story is when I was very young, when I was 16, 17, I wanted to go into radio. So I've always had this fascination with audio. I've built a few different businesses in the radio broadcasting space over the years, and fast forward to about 15 years, I'm now in my early 30s. I've got 3 different companies. So I have radio.co, podcast.co, and matchmaker.fm. And Matchmaker is the newest of the bunch. We launched just over a year ago, so like February 2020, just before the pandemic hit in, which was kind of good timing in a weird way. And the idea of Matchmaker is it's a platform to connect podcasters and guests. So initially we kind of tongue-in-cheek build it as like Tinder, but for podcasters, because as you'll know, with you guys, finding guests, certainly finding 114 guests can sometimes prove to be a bit of a challenge, and making sure that you've consistently got good quality and interesting people who you can invite on your show and talk to and put the world to rights and learn from and all that great stuff that makes podcasting so unique and special. And we decided we had another business, podcast.co, so we were already involved in the space, and we were kind of looking at different ways that we could market our podcast hosting platform. And one of the things that was really apparent, that was so many podcasts that were based on interviews. So initially Matchmaker we fell upon the idea really by accident. We were looking at ways to market the product. We kind of set up these landing pages, one which said, hey, if you're looking for great guests, can you fill out this form and tell us more about yourself? And one that said, if you're a guest, if you're an expert, you want to get featured on podcasts, please fill out this form and tell us about yourself. And we noticed that more and more people were coming to these pages and filling out like quite detailed sort of profiles, about what their expertise was or what sort of guests they were looking for. But we didn't actually have any way of connecting the two groups of people together. So we thought, well, maybe we're onto something here. This could be an interesting product for us as a company. So we then sort of put it on hold probably for about 6 months. And just before Christmas 2019, we thought, okay, let's try and build this thing. Let's create something and see how it goes down. Launched in, as I mentioned, February 2020. And it's grown tremendously over the past year. We're just about to hit 28,000 users. So it's really exciting.
Very good. Very good. So, and as Kathleen said, we'll give you testament to that. We find it really good for finding guests to be on our show and for guests finding us as well. And we get people contacting us. And I've been on a couple of shows through your service. So that's great. Even before the pandemic started, there was a tremendous rise in the popularity of podcasting. And of course, the coronavirus thing has given it extra momentum. So what do you attribute that rise in popularity to, James?
it's an interesting question because obviously podcasting is not actually that new as a medium. It's been around for like 15 or so years. So I think probably about 5 years ago, so for 2016, 2017, there was kind of like a big uplift in the popularity. I think it's become more of a mainstream media. So before, you know, if you go back 10 years, you had to listen to a podcast, you had to go onto the iTunes program, download the episode to your computer, plug your iPhone in or your iPod as it was back then, transfer that file. And that whole process was kind of quite techie, you know, quite convoluted and probably reserved for like the enthusiasts. Whereas, you know, nowadays everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket. Most people have got good data plans so they can stream high quality video and audio content. They're not worried about running out of data or whatever. And also the advent of things like smart speakers. So, you know, Alexa, Google Home, all that kind of stuff means that suddenly we've got this ecosystem that means that podcasts are not only accessible from anywhere, but easily accessible. And I think that's probably been the main reason that podcasting has been so popular. And also, I think more recently, the last couple of years, certainly here in the UK, and you know, I'm sure in Canada as well, there's been a lot of celebrities getting involved with the medium. It seems that whenever you switch on a TV show, they're like a panel discussion or you know, a talk show, they're all pitching like, I've written a book this year, and also I've got a podcast that I've just launched. And I think, you know, because celebrities have jumped on the podcasting medium as a way of, you know, communicating with their fan bases, their audiences, that's also meant that the adoption of other podcasts that perhaps aren't as famous or not sort of celebrity-ified has also risen because, you know, you've suddenly got access to more of an audience than as podcasters than perhaps we did 5 years ago.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in. Sorry, Kathleen. While I think of it, James has just triggered something in my little brain here. Do you think a rising number of people are getting disenchanted with mainstream media, particularly news broadcasts? In my personal observation, I gave up satellite TV, I don't know, 8 years ago. And I get most of my news from various alternate sites. And a lot of it is people like who are doing podcasts.
Yeah, I think there is that too. You know, I think it's the people's medium. You know, it's the good thing about podcasting versus radio is there's no regulation, which you know, I guess you can see as a positive and a negative, depending on, obviously should always be used for good. But you know, with radio, there's lots of things that you can't say. Certainly when it comes down to politics and things like that, you know, most countries will have heavy regulated, you know, things of what you can't say over the airwaves. Whereas on the internet, you know, obviously freedom of speech, you can basically talk about anything. So I do think people trust podcasts. You know, it's a very well known fact that when people are listening to podcasts, they're tuning in for a lot of the episodes. So about 75% of people who listen to a podcast will actually listen for the entire episode. So you have their attention for a long time. And I think that kind of that bond between the listener and the podcaster is very intimate. You know, it's just one-on-one almost. It just feels like you're almost there with having the conversation with that person. Whereas, yeah, I think people are more and more increasingly not trusting mainstream media because, you know, certainly I think in recent years, you know, even here in the UK, we've got the BBC that's supposed to be very impartial and this, that, and the other. And there's been lots and lots of people who have commented, say, you know, we're not sure it is anymore, and this, that, and the other. So, I mean, that's a discussion for another day, right? But
yeah, sure.
I think, I think podcasting is a great way of sourcing information and sort of hearing real stories.
Yeah, good.
Tell our audience about booking 30 podcasts in 30 days using Matchmaker.
Yeah, so this was last summer, so it was kind of May, June time, and we just, you know, as I said, we hadn't been live for that long, so we were probably 3-4 months in. I wanted to, for one, like get involved with the platform myself. You know, I wanted to sort of walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So I was like, I've just got to get on as many podcasts as I can, and I thought it would be an interesting piece for our story. To document how I did that, you know, and sort of just show that anyone could do it. So the plan was really simple: 30 podcasts, 30 days. I excluded weekends, so it was actually more like over 6-week period, so I could have Saturday and Sunday off. So I was just counting Monday to Friday, and it was pretty intense. There were some days where I was recording four episodes a day. I ended up doing, I think, 46 or 48 podcasts in that period of time.
Wow.
It was great fun. I loved it. It was a lot of work. It was quite an intensive thing. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I think because I'm in lockdown and I'm working it out of my home office here, it probably gave me the opportunity to do that. I think if I was, normally we're office based. I'm running 3 different companies now, 3 different sort of sites. So I've got quite a big team behind me, which is great. But it means that I quite often, have lots of meetings or have people coming up to me. But because I was in lockdown, it meant that I could quite easily jump in and out of podcasts. And I think that's probably been the same for a lot of people over the sort of past year.
Yeah, well done. I watched your workshop when you announced that you were going to do that.
Yeah.
And you also had some really valuable advice for guests who wanted to be on other people's podcasts and for show hosts like us who wanted to get good guests on their podcast. You sort of so anyone who wants to know more, get onto James's site, and which we'll tell you about just now, and I think you'll find that somewhere along the line. I wanted to ask you about your other 2 activities, though, podcast.co and radio.co. Tell our audience a little bit more about those 2.
Okay, so podcast.co is a platform to host your podcasts, which launched in 2018 or 19. Get confused. Yeah, I think it's 2018. And, we've made the process as simple as possible. There's lots of value-added features, so you can automatically turn your audio into text, so you can transcribe your episodes. You can create video clips to promote the best bits of your episodes automatically. You can also create private podcasts. We're seeing these are becoming increasingly popular, particularly for larger companies in the corporate space.
Mm-hmm.
So they might be using it as a way to communicate with their staff, because people don't read newsletters as much anymore. So podcasting is a great way to engage your sort of stakeholders. And then over at radio.co, very different business, sounds similar, but we power radio stations. It's a live streaming platform. We have about 5,000 radio stations all around the world who are running on our cloud-based software.
Wow. Okay. That is interesting.
Yeah. And we launched radio.co about 6 years ago now. So that's, yeah.
Impressive. Oh my goodness. There are a lot of people out there that are doing podcasts these days, but are not able to monetize it. What would you have some advice for those people?
I think sometimes, yeah, I mean, there's various different routes to monetization. And I guess, again, it depends on why you're doing your podcast in the first place. There's a lot of businesses out there who you will use podcasts as a way of networking, of meeting potential clients. So although you might not necessarily be running adverts on your podcast, there's other ways that you could be generating revenue or getting customers. Interestingly, Spotify and Apple have just both announced, within the past week, the concept of having user-supported podcasts. So basically, this is where the listener will pay effectively a subscription to have access to perhaps ad-free podcasts, or they'll get the episodes before everyone else, or they'll get access to content that other people, the free feed doesn't have. So there are lots of different ways where you can monetize, which don't just involve running adverts or getting a sponsor. But the thing I would say is you don't have to necessarily have millions of listeners to get sponsorship and to make revenue from your podcast. I think it's really important that if you're looking to monetize a podcast, it's really crucial that you have a good idea of who your audience is. If the more specific you can be about understanding who's listening, the more ability you'll have to go out and pitch your show to potential sponsors. Because if you can prove that even though if you've got a smaller audience, that they're a super specific match for the sponsor, they'll be very, very keen to get on board. And I think companies are becoming more experimental, and they're becoming more interested in the audio space and using audio as a form of advertising alongside their sort of traditional ad spend, on whether that be on online advertising or TV or radio, etc. But it's also proven that people are very engaged. So when people listen to a commercial sort of advert or sponsorship sort of announcement on a podcast, they tend to take action more so than on other mediums, which I think is quite interesting.
It is interesting. I'm going to switch topics a little bit because this interests me, and I know that you spoke on one of your workshops about property and investing in property.
Yeah, sure.
So you obviously believe property is a good investment. So tell our audience a little more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I haven't got a huge portfolio. I have like I'm about to buy my 5th property actually, including the one that I live in. And it's something that I probably got into. Well, I first of all bought my own property to live in, and it's really interesting. I live in the middle of Manchester city centre, so I bought my first ever property about 6 years, coming up to 7 years ago now, just over 6 years. And I invested in an area that at the time was a little bit up and coming. So it's in the middle of Manchester, but it's been really developed over the past few years. And I had the property revalued, and I've practically doubled my money in 6 years. Not quite, but nearly doubled my money. So I think investing in property is a safe bet. It's always a good. If you're an entrepreneur and you've got some money that's sat in the bank and it's not doing much, you need to try and make it work somehow. And I certainly think interest rates at the moment are rubbish. You don't get anything with money sat in the bank, so you need to try and put it to work for you. So I think property is always a safe investment. There's never really property will always be, people will always need places to live. The one drawback I'd say is sometimes managing tenants can be a little bit problematic. I've been lucky; I've not had too many bad experiences, but I have had a few headaches, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think again you've got to take a long view on property. I mean, we all know that the
Yep.
last few years have been really good, and here in Canada we've seen residential property doubling in value in 5 years. But it'd be stupid to think that would continue forever. But it might have some ups and downs. But over the long term, it generally is a good investment.
Yeah, again, I think for me, it's about creating assets that are sort of self-sustaining. So it's like they will pay for themselves over a very, very long period of time. But it's a great alternative to pension. It's good. It's better to have your money sort of sat in property versus having it sat in the bank, I think.
Absolutely. And when you have a couple of successful businesses, it's good to have money in something more stable then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not saying your business is unstable, don't get me wrong, but we've seen many successful entrepreneurs expand, and then bang, they lose the lot. Yeah. Sorry, Kathleen, back to you.
So getting back to podcasting, do you believe that podcasts should be both on audio and video platforms?
Yes, I think so. I think there are lots of podcasters that still shy away from using video. The main benefits for me is that some people like watching, you can kind of read people's facial reactions. And I've done a lot of interviews where, you can see the host or when I've been interviewing people, you can see them on video, but then you actually just turn it into an audio thing. But I kind of think, well, if like we're doing now, we can see each other anyway, you might as well capture that. Sure. The other really good thing about using video for your podcast is you can turn it into other assets, so you can easily post it on social media. So platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, etc., they're all very much geared towards video as it stands. Interestingly, they're all sort of slowly realizing that they need to be like looking at audio as a way of communicating or allowing people to communicate too. But I still think video kind of, people are scrolling through the feed. If they capture, if they hit on a video that looks interesting and you've done it right, it can be a great marketing tool for your podcast.
Yeah, certainly our experience in the year and a bit that we've been going is that on average our videos get, I don't know, Kathleen, 20 times the listens or views that our audio does. I think the best performing audio one may be around 50% of downloads compared to the video version, and that would be the best, but most it's about 10%. And we push them both.
Yeah, the YouTube in itself is just a huge search engine. People are always looking to find out information. So as long as you're capturing your videos right, and if you're uploading the full episode, talking about what is contained within that episode, people will sit there and listen. And quite often just they will have that on in the background. But I still think YouTube is if you're creating a podcast, there's no harm in creating a video and uploading it to YouTube. It doesn't really cost much time or energy really to do that, I think.
No, it doesn't. Right. It doesn't. And there's software out there that makes it easy to strip the audio out of the video once you've added the bells and whistles onto it. It's not a big problem.
Yeah.
So I got one I got to ask you. We asked this of most of our successful business people who come on the show, and you're successful by any measure. So in your experience, James, if I was to ask you what's the biggest single characteristic that differentiates successful people from the average, what would you say on that?
That's a good question. And do you know what? I don't think the answer's not always black and white. I think for me, like I think my success was due to the fact that kind of I started at a very early age. I was very, very inquisitive. I had like a very, very much like a need to learn different skills and try and master different crafts when I was young. And I think that was kind of what prompted me to start my businesses in the first place. And you've got to be creative, I think, as well. I think creativity is hugely important as an entrepreneur. I think, but again, it depends. There are some like, for example, I'm not like a boffin when it comes to numbers, for example. I'm not like one of these people who sit there with spreadsheets, like doing profit and loss. And, I have accountants who do that for me. But there are some entrepreneurs who are successful because they're so vigilant with their numbers, you know what I mean? And they're great at doing that. So I think there's not sort of like a single characteristic. It just varies on the individual. But for me, I think it's always been kind of like creativity and just kind of like the love of creating things, building products and stuff, creating solutions.
I guess people skills are important. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I heard you say that you're managing 3 businesses virtually. There's got to be some good teamwork and good leadership to keep all that going, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I've got about 34 team members now. So some are working on different products and some working across both, but mostly we try and put everyone into different departments because each product needs its own sort of care and attention, and you've got to make sure that you don't take your eye off the ball on one or the other. But yeah, I think it's been interesting because, as I say, we're normally office based. So this year we have not been recruiting as much as we normally would in Manchester. So we have started taking people on remotely. Whereas we traditionally would always look for people to be, in the office. And I was very much just like, being there 9 to 5 myself was really important. I don't think we're ever going to go back to that way of working again, where, with the full team are in 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And, we have flexi time and things back then, but I think we're going to be a lot more flexible in terms of, if people want to work from home, they can. I still try to encourage people to come and use the office as a base, because I do think, that's one thing I've missed is that face-to-face collaboration, kind of human interaction over the past year. But yeah, I think in some respects, we've coped pretty well as a company. We were we adapted very, very fast. I think just because a lot of our processes and systems and the things that we do are all kind of online anyway, it very much meant that when lockdown happened, and we actually went working remote probably like about 2 weeks before lockdown officially came into play here in the UK. But we did a sort of trial run day, like a day where we said, right, everyone go home, work from home, just to see if there was any problems.
Right.
But it was really smooth. And, I think because we're a modern company, we have a lot of modern practices and processes in place. It wasn't a scary thing for us. Whereas I've got friends who work for other businesses, and there's been a lot more turmoil because they weren't ready. They weren't prepared for it. And, suddenly they're forced to kind of send everyone home, and they kind of like, they struggle to kind of communicate, or they struggle to, like, in some cases the staff didn't even have the equipment to go and work from home and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been an interesting year, but I think we've taken a few sort of golden nuggets from it, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Kathleen, we've got a couple of minutes. Can I jump in with another very quick one?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You look into your crystal ball, James. Where's podcasting going? 2 years down the track, what are we going to be looking at?
Everyone asks me this. I wish I knew the answer, because I'm sure that would make me very rich indeed. I think it's quite interesting to see how Spotify and Apple are really battling it out now. Like Apple literally announced on, I think it was like Monday, that they were implementing this monetization system where, subscribers can pay for access, as I mentioned earlier. Spotify just announced that today. So within literally days of each other, there's 2 announcements from these 2 giant companies. They're obviously trying to corner that market. These 2 businesses are trying to sort of absorb the market, which I think is a great shame. I think if podcasting becomes, controlled by one player, then it sort of loses its magic sort of
Yeah.
the thing that sort of I was talking about earlier. It's like the people's media. You won't get that. Suddenly it's going to be like, well, you can say this and you can't say this, and we don't want you to say this because it's going to offend this advertiser or whatever.
Right.
So, but again, these are two huge companies. Apple's obviously the biggest company in the world, or one of them. Spotify isn't, but it's still pretty large in terms of organizations. It's got a huge user base. So yeah, I really don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see if one of them wins or if it kind of just stays a sort of an even playing field, which I hope it does.
But do you? I'm going to push this one a little more. Do you think that companies like your Podco and Podbean that we use and a few others, you think they will collectively take a larger share of the market away from Spotify and Apple?
Well, they're aggregators. So Spotify and
Yeah.
Apple are, Spotify, I do own a company called Anchor, which is very similar to
Anchor,
Podbean or podcast.co.
Yeah.
And they bought Anchor because they were trying to, onboard as many podcasts as they could. The problem with Anchor is it's because it's free. Like 90% of the podcasts on there are just totally junk in terms of like there might be, I think when Spotify acquired Anchor, there was like 80,000 podcasts on Anchor, something like that. But out of those 80,000, there might have only been 5 or 10,000 that had got more than like 1 or 2 episodes. So there's just a lot of stuff that's like someone has an idea to start a podcast. They upload 1 episode, or they do like less than 10 episodes and then they give up.
Yeah.
So does that really count as a good podcast? Of course it doesn't. So I'm not sure. I wish I could kind of tell you what's happening. I think what's also interesting is obviously if you've heard of the app Clubhouse, that's kind of come on.
Yeah.
It's sort of not really podcasting, but it's an audio-based platform. And suddenly, as a reaction to that, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, all working on similar, integrations, implementations to Clubhouse. So they're kind of trying to recreate the Clubhouse experience on their own platforms, which again is interesting. And I think I sort of see it as an extension of podcasting. Is there's opportunities there for you to just grow your audience even more.
Sure.
But you'll still need the way the podcasting system's designed is you need a host to stick it on, and that will obviously then get syndicated out to various different platforms, which is where companies like Podbean, who you work with, or podcast.co come in.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks, James. Kathleen, back to you.
So James, how do people contact you?
So if you want to get in touch, all of my social links are on jamesm.com. If you go to jamesm.com/connect, all my social media links are on there. And you can go and check us out on matchmaker.fm, podcast.co, radio.co, of course. Lots of great information and advice on all those sites if you're interested in any of those kind of mediums.
Excellent, James.
Thank you so much for being our guest today, James. We learned a lot. Thank you. And to all our viewers out there, we love Matchmaker. We have a profile on that platform and have received so many wonderful guests through the Matchmaker platform. So thank you very much, James.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, James.
And thank you all for tuning in. We so appreciate you, and we love reading your comments. So please keep those coming. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.